Maseches Kiddushin Daf Lamed Dalid continues our analysis of our most recent Mishnah, but now we will be discussing the next part of the Mishnah, focusing on which mitzvahs a woman is obligated to perform and which mitzvahs she is patur from. So our Mishnah had said that there's a rule: any mitzvah say that is caused by the time, meaning that the mitzvah is only active and effective during certain times, that mitzvah say shehazman grama, women are patur from; they are not obligated to perform. However, mitzvah say which is irrelevant of the time, not limited to any specific time, mitzvah say shaloi hazman grama, it is not caused by a time. Those types of mitzvahs say women are obligated in. Of course, we're only talking about mitzvahs say. Women are obligated in all mitzvahs lo say. So the Gemara now challenges this rule. So Gemara brings a brisa that says that what some examples of the rule are, and then the Gemara challenges that there are other things which don't fit the rule. So the brisa lists as examples of mitzvahs say shezman grama, sukkah, lulav, shofar, tzitzis, tefillin. Sukkah and lulav obviously are only relevant on the Yom Tov of Sukkot. Shofar is only in Rosh Hashanah. Tzitzis is only during the daytime hours, at least according to this brisa. Tefillin is also only during the day, and it doesn't apply on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, so it's only during a weekday. Another brisa says an example of a mitzvah to say that is not closed by the time is mezuzah, ma'aka, having a fence around a high surface, returning a lost object, and sending away a mother bird from the nest, shiloh hakin. So all these things are mitzvahs to say that don't have any relevance to the time. Simar asks, there are things which don't fit the rule. Matzah is a mitzvah to say shezman grama. It's only the first night of Pesach, and yet women are chayiv in it. The Gemara brings a drasha in Pesachim specifically to show that they are chayiv in. Anybody who's chayiv in avoiding chametz is chayiv in eating matzah. Simcha, the mitzvah to be joyful on Sukkot. Of course, mitzvah to say shezman grama, women are chayiv in it. Hakel, that's specifically once in 7 years, women are chayiv in that as well. The Torah says clearly. So those are examples of mitzvah sasei shezman grama that women are chayiv in. And now we have examples of mitzvah sasei shaloi hazman grama that they are patur in. Talmud Torah, Piriya Verivia, that is having children, Pidyon Aben, all these things were brought earlier in the Masechta. So again, how does this rule fit? So the Gemara answers, Yechanan says, you can never learn out halachas from rules. There are exceptions to all the rules. You can't rely on a rule, even if it's said in a Mishnah, to teach you what halacha is. That's even true, says Rabbi Yechanan, where the rule specifically gives an exemption, an exception. It says this is the rule except ABC, you still can't assume that there are no other exceptions. And the Gemara shows an example of that. We have a Mishnah that talks about what can you use to make an Erev Chatzeres or Shetufe Mevois. Erev Chatzeres and Shetufe Mevois are when people combine their stake in a certain property so that they can carry from one Chatzer or from one Mavoi to another using an Erev. They all have to have a ownership of something that is food that provides sustenance in one of the homes and one of the chatzerim of the chatzer or the mavoi. So what can you use? What type of food qualifies for this? So the Mishnah says anything except for water and salt. But that's not true, because there are other things that you also can't use. You can't use water and salt because they don't provide sustenance. You also can't use mushrooms and other types of fungal foods. They don't provide sustenance to the person. So obviously then, even though you have a rule with an exception, you still can't assume that there are no other exceptions. Okay, the Gemara now goes into how do we know that there is a p'tur for all women on a mitzvah sasei shezman grama. So the Gemara says we learn it from tefillin, and tefillin itself we learn from Talmud Torah. We know that women are not obligated in Talmud Torah, like it says v'limadatem es b'neichem. You're only obligated to teach your sons and not your daughters. Now in Shema, Talmud Torah, it says right next to the mitzvah of tefillin, v'shinantem levanecha, and then ukshartem leisal yadecha. So therefore, we learn from Talmud Torah to tefillin that women are not obligated in tefillin, and then from tefillin we learn with a mamatzinu to kol Torah kula that any mitzvahs asay shezman grama women are not obligated in. So the Gemara says, why did you learn from Talmud Torah to tefillin? Because Talmud Torah is next to tefillin. Later in Shema, mezuzah is next to tefillin. Mezuzah is, it says, uchsaftam al mezuzah is beisachol uvesharecha, right after tefillin. So learn from tefillin, from mezuzah to tefillin, that women are obligated in tefillin, just like they're obligated in mezuzah. And then the whole train of thought doesn't begin. So the Gemara says no. Tefillin is written next to Talmud Torah both in the first parsha of Shema and the second parsha of Shema. The first one, as we said, says Vishinamtam levonecha and then Ukshartam la'is. And the second one, it says V'samtam Israela al levacha yonafshem Ukshartam la'is al yedechem. And right after that, it says V'limadatam oizim es benechem. So it's linked both in the first parsha and in the second parsha. But mezuzah is not linked to Tefillin in the second parsha of Shema. It has Talmud Torah in between them. So therefore, we're going to link it to Talmud Torah and not to mezuzah. So the Gemara says, okay, but you have Talmud Torah right next to mezuzah. So let's learn from Talmud Torah to mezuzah. Just like women are pater in Talmud Torah, they should be pater in mezuzah as well. Why do we say that women are chayiv in mezuzah? So the Gemara says, no, women can't be pater in mezuzah because the Torah specifically gives a reason for the mitzvah of mezuzah. It says, "L'man yirbu yimechem," in order to lengthen your lives, and that's something which women require, not only men. Okay, now the Gemara says, you're telling me that we can learn from Tefillin to all mitzvahs and the Torah that a mitzvah sasesha is magram is pater, but then how come we need a special limit for sukkahs? By sukkahs it says, sukkahs teishu shivas yamim ha'ezrach, and that's to exclude women, only an ezrach, which means a man, and not a woman. So why do you need a special limit if you can learn from Tefillin? So the Gemara answers, you need a special limud for sukkah because you may have had a reason to think that sukkah is an exception to the rule. Because of the fact that it says Teishu and Keduru, you should live in the sukkah as you live in your house. Just like in a house, it's a man and his wife together. A sukkah would also have to be a man and his wife together. Therefore, you need a special limud to tell me that women are pater. Rava gives another answer. There is a connection between Sukkot and Pesach. Both happen on the 15th of the month. And we learn halachas from one to the other. And in Pesach, we know that a woman is chayiv, as we mentioned earlier. And therefore, you may learn from Pesach to Sukkot that a woman is chayiv on Sukkot as well. Therefore, the Torah has to specifically exclude it. All right, now the Gemara has another similar kasha from the mitzvah of Re'iyah, the mitzvah to be Eile Regel. It's a mitzvah to say Shehazman Grama. And yet, I need a pasuk of Zechurcha to tell me that women are not obligated. Only Zechurcha, only your males are obligated in that mitzvah, but women are pater. So the mitzvah says Shehazman Grama, why do I need a pasuk? So the Gemara answers, you may think that you should learn Re'iyah from Hakel. The word Re'iyah appears by Hakel as well. The mitzvah to gather together at the end of Sukkot on a Shemitah year. And there it specifically says that women need to be there. So you may think to learn from that Re'iyah to the Re'iyah of Aliyah Regel. And therefore, you need the pasuk to tell me, especially only Zechurcha and not anyone else. Okay, the Gemara now opens up a different line of questioning. We said we learned from Tefillin and Zamatzina to Kol HaTorah Kul that every mitzvah sasesha is mangroma. Women are pturos in, but there are other mitzvahs sasesha is mangroma that women are chayavos in. Why don't you learn from them to Kol HaTorah Kul? Somewhere goes through them one at a time. So the Gemara says, first of all, why don't you learn from the mitzvah of Simcha? Women are obligated to be b'simcha on Sukkot. Mitzvah sasesha is mangroma. So why do you learn from there? So the Gemara answers, that obligation is not on the woman, it's on her husband. It's on her husband to be misameach her with Caleb Naim. And therefore, it is something that is an obligation on the man. You can't say that you're going to learn from here that women are obligated. So the Gemara says, well, hold on. But it says that a widow is also obligated in that simcha. And a widow doesn't have a husband to be misameach her. So what are you going to say to that? So my answer is that obligation is also not on her. It's on the people that are supporting her. If she's not poor, or if she doesn't have anyone to support her, she's no obligation on herself to be misameach herself. His obligation is on whoever is with her. So says, okay, that's about simcha. Now what about the mitzvah of hakel? I want to learn from hakel that mitzvah says Gurama women are chayavos in. So Gemara says we could have, but there's another pasuk, that of matzah, was also mitzvah says Gurama that women are chayavos in, and then you have what's called shnei ksufim b'am ke'echad ein melamdim. You have two psukim that teach the same halacha, and one of them is extra, because if I just said one, I should be able to learn to the other, and the fact that I have both is to limit it to just these two and not anywhere else. So the Gemara says, if that's true, so why don't you say that tefillin and re'iyah, tefillin and the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel, are also shnei ksuvin amban ke'echad ein melamdin. On that, the Gemara asks, your source from tefillin, the women are peturos, also has another one, and it's a mitzvah, and it's shnei ksuvin amban ke'echad. You have both tefillin and olas re'iyah, the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel, to go to Yerushalayim 3 times a year on a regel. There, it says Zechurcha, women are pater in that. So you have, that's also Shnei Ksuvim Habayim Ke'echad. So why don't you say that can't apply further? And the halacha that women are patur in the mitzvah Haseish as my grandma is limited to these two and not to anything else. So Mer says, no, those two, neither of them are extra. The Torah would have only said one of them, it would not have known the other. Therefore, you need to have both of them. Therefore, you cannot apply mitzvahs. You cannot apply shnei ksuvim b'ankachan b'lamdin, and we learn from there to Imam and to everywhere else. Now, why do I need each of them? So the Gemara says, if the Torah would have only said tefillin and it would not have said riyah, I would have thought that the mitzvah of riyah I should learn out of hakel. Right? It says riyah by ali l'regel, and it says riyah by hakel. Just like by hakel, women are chayavos. Would have thought women are chayavos in riyah as well. Therefore, the Torah has to say riyah. If it would have just said riyah, not tefillin, I would have thought to make hakish between tefillin and mezuzah, like we said earlier. Just like women are chayavos and mezuzah, they should be chayav in tefillin. Therefore, I have to say both of those. So the Gemara asks, okay, well, hold on a second. If you could do that, then your two psukim that you have that in a situation where women are chayavos in the mitzvah sasei shesman grama, which was matzah and simcha, those are also not shnei ksuvim b'lanka echad, because you have a reason you need both of them. Says the Gemara, no, you don't have a reason that you need each of them. Let's think it through. If it would have only said the mitzvah of hakel, I would still need it to write matzah, because otherwise I would have thought you should learn matzah from sukkah. By sukkah it says Ezra to exclude women. I would have thought that matzah, which is learned with the Gzeir Shavat Tesvav, that they're both on the 15th of the month, that they also, women should be pituros. But if it would have just said by sukkahs, if it would have just said matzah, I would not have needed to say it by hakel. By hakel it says anashim v'taf. Nashim anashim v'taf. It says men, women, and children. If you would have just said men and children, I would have understood. If children are chayiv, women are chayiv for sure. So therefore, you didn't have to say nashim. The fact that it says nashim is extra, and therefore you have shnei ksuvim b'lanka echad, and that limits the areas in which women are obligated in mitzvah sasei shesman grama to these two, and not to anything else. So on this, the Gemara has now two kashas on the entire sugya. First of all, the Gemara says there's an opinion that says shnei ksuvim b'lanka echad malamdim. Even if you have two sources, you can still learn from there to everywhere else. So what are you going to do according to that opinion? Just because you have two sources to limit mitzvah sasei shesman grama that women are chayavos, you should learn from there to everywhere else anyway. Second question, the Gemara says, is that we have a drasha how we learn that mitzvah sasei shelo yezman grama, that women are chayavos. The drasha is from the mitzvah of fear, of awe, of yiras, of aim. And we had a drasha earlier in Daf Chof Tes where it says tira'u, refers to multiple people to show that women are obligated in the mitzvah of yiras of aim. So that the Gemara asks, we want to learn from Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah is a mitzvah sasei shelo yezman grama. It applies in all times, and women are paturos, as it says explicitly, like we mentioned earlier. So Gemara says, because there are two things that are mitzvah sasei shelo yezman grama that women are paturos on, and therefore shnei ksuvim b'lanka echad ein malamdim. What are the two things? Talmud Torah is one, period v'rivya is the other, and therefore it's ein malamdim. Now the Gemara is going to go more deeply into this and question this limud, but it's a lengthy discussion which we'll have on Daf Lamed Hey.